Welcome to the Hall of Crimes, where we take a dive into the heinous crimes of individuals that prove evil exists. Darren Deon Vann, a name whispered in hushed tones, a name that sends shivers down your spine. Vann was a monster, a serial killer who terrorized the streets of Gary, Indiana. But how did he become this way? What dark forces twisted him into the monster he became? Vann's early life was shrouded in darkness. Born in 1967, his childhood was a breeding ground for instability. Shuffled between different relatives, he never found a stable home. This lack of stability left an indelible mark on his psyche. It warped his sense of normalcy. As a teenager, Vann's troubled mind began to manifest itself in disturbing ways. He developed a fascination with death and violence. Some whispered about animal cruelty, a precursor to his later atrocities. The seeds of evil had been sown. This was just the beginning of a nightmare that would soon grip Gary, Indiana. The year was 2013. A string of disappearances plagued the city of Gary. Women vanished without a trace. Fear gripped the community. The shadows seemed to hold a new kind of danger. A chilling pattern was emerging. The victims were vulnerable women, alone, last seen in desolate areas of Gary. The police suspected a predator. The investigation was slow. A monster was hiding in plain sight. The body count was rising. Darren Deon Vann was the boogeyman at its heart. October 19th, 2014. A date forever etched in the annals of Gary's history. It was the day the nightmare took on a terrifying new dimension. The body of 19-year-old Africa Hardy was discovered in a motel room in Hammond, Indiana, a town bordering Gary, strangled, left to rot. This was not just another missing person case, this was murder. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The fear that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted. People were horrified. Who was capable of such a brutal act? The police launched a full-scale investigation, desperate to find the killer before he could claim another victim. Little did they know they were already dealing with a serial killer, a monster who had been hiding in plain sight, a monster who was about to lead them on a horrifying treasure hunt, a hunt for the bodies of his victims. Darren Deon Vann didn't crack under the pressure of the investigation. He folded like a deck of cards. He confessed to killing Africa Hardy. And then he did something even more chilling. He offered to take the police to his other victims. He led them on a grim procession through the abandoned buildings and desolate landscapes of Gary. Each stop brought a new horror, another life extinguished, another family left to grieve. The body count climbed. The city watched in horror as the news unfolded. The full extent of Vann's depravity was beyond their worst nightmares. He hadn't just killed these women, he had discarded them like trash, their bodies left to rot in the city's underbelly. 7 victims, 7 lives cut short, 7 families shattered. The city of Gary reeled. The news spread like wildfire. The national media descended on the small Indiana town. Amidst the horror and grief, questions lingered. How could this have happened? How could someone commit such atrocities undetected for so long? Whispers of the victims' lifestyles filled the air, but one question echoed louder than the rest. Why? What drove Darren Deon Vann to commit such unspeakable acts? The answer, like the man himself, remained shrouded in darkness. A chilling reminder that monsters often wear the most ordinary of faces. Fear. It was palpable. It hung in the air like smog. The residents of Gary, Indiana, were used to hardship. They were no strangers to crime, but this was different. This was terror. The knowledge that a serial killer had been living among them, preying on their most vulnerable, sent chills down their spines. Mothers clutched their daughters a little tighter. Women walked the streets with their keys clenched between their fingers, ready to fight. The police presence in the city intensified. Patrol cars cruised the streets day and night, their flashing lights a constant reminder of the unseen danger. The FBI was called in. Profilers, forensic experts, and seasoned detectives converged on Gary, determined to bring the killer to justice. The city held its breath, waiting, watching, praying for answers. The investigation was a logistical nightmare. The crimes spanned years. The victims, often leading transient lives, were difficult to track. And then there was Vann's modus operandi. He was a ghost, leaving little to no trace of himself at the crime scenes. But the investigators had one thing working in their favor: Vann himself. His confession, while chilling, was also a roadmap. He provided details about the victims, the locations, the methods, details that only the killer could have known. The police followed every lead, no matter how small. They scoured databases, interviewed witnesses, and combed through hours of surveillance footage. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to connect the dots. A pattern emerged, a timeline of terror. The more the investigators learned about Darren Deon Vann, the more disturbed they became. His criminal history, though minor, hinted at a darker side. His military service, marked by disciplinary issues, raised red flags. And then there were the rumors, whispers of a man obsessed with death, a man who enjoyed inflicting pain. The net was closing in. The police released Vann's photo to the public, hoping someone would come forward with information, and they did. Tips poured in, some credible, some not. Each one was carefully vetted, each one brought them closer to the truth. The pressure was immense. The eyes of the nation were on Gary, Indiana. The police knew they had to catch this monster, not just for the sake of the victims and their families, but for the sake of their own city. A city held hostage by fear. Darren Deon Vann didn't break under interrogation. He didn't crack under the weight of the evidence. He simply confessed, matter-of-factly, without remorse. He told the police about his victims, about his methods, about his twisted desires. His confession was chilling in its detail. He described how he lured his victims, how he overpowered them, how he took their lives. He spoke about the killings with a detached coldness that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned detectives. The confession was a turning point in the investigation. It provided confirmation of what they had suspected all along. Darren Deon Vann was a serial killer, but it also raised more questions. Why? Why these women? Why this city? Questions that may never be fully answered. Vann's confession led police on a chilling pilgrimage. He directed them to a dilapidated house on East 43rd Avenue in Gary. The house stood silent, a boarded-up sentinel guarding its gruesome secrets. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay. This wasn't just a crime scene, it was a tomb. Inside, the full horror of Vann's crimes unfolded. The bodies of 6 women were found in various states of decomposition, discarded in the home's darkened corners like forgotten trash. Each victim had a story, a life cut tragically short. Their names: Tyra Betty, Anith Jones, Christine Williams, Tracy Martin, Sonia Billingsley and Tanya Gatlin, became synonymous with the unspeakable evil that had visited Gary. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The sheer depravity of the scene, the casual disregard for human life was beyond comprehension. This wasn't just a crime, it was an act of pure evil. With each victim discovered, the picture of Darren Deon Vann became clearer. He wasn't a phantom, he was a man hiding in plain sight. Neighbors described him as quiet, unassuming, almost invisible. He blended in, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Vann's past offered glimpses into the making of a monster, a troubled childhood, a history of violence against women. His ex-wife had filed a protective order against him years earlier, alleging abuse and threats. The warning signs were there, but they went unheeded. The investigation revealed a chilling pattern to Vann's crimes. He targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers struggling with addiction. He lured them with the promise of drugs or money, then took them to abandoned buildings where he could unleash his rage with impunity. Darren Deon Vann was arrested and charged with 7 counts of murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming: his confession, the bodies of his victims, and DNA evidence linking him to the crime scenes. He was denied bail and awaited trial in Lake County Jail. The trial was a formality, a chance for the families of the victims to confront the monster who had stolen their loved ones. Vann showed no remorse, his demeanour cold and detached. He was a predator who had stalked the streets of Gary for years, and now he would finally answer for his crimes. In 2019, Darren Deon Vann was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice was served, but it couldn't bring back the 7 women whose lives he had taken. Their absence left a void in the community, a constant reminder of the darkness that had visited Gary. The horrors unearthed in Gary, Indiana, left an indelible mark on the city's soul. The shock, the fear, the grief. It hung heavy in the air, a grim spectre haunting the streets. The community, once a vibrant tapestry of lives, now felt fragile, vulnerable, exposed. The case of Darren Deon Vann wasn't just another crime story. It was a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths. It exposed the city's underbelly, the forgotten corners where poverty, addiction and violence festered. It shone a light on the plight of marginalized women, often overlooked and underestimated, easy prey for a predator like Vann. The national spotlight, while unwelcome, forced Gary to confront its demons. The city, already grappling with economic hardship and social ills, now had to contend with the stigma of being known as the place where a serial killer hunted with impunity. Grief washed over Gary in waves. The families of the victims, shattered by their loss, struggled to make sense of the senseless. Their daughters, mothers, sisters, friends, gone, taken too soon. Their absence left a void, a constant ache in the hearts of those who loved them. The community rallied around the families, offering support and solace. Vigils were held, memorials erected. Their names, once whispered in fear, were now spoken with love. Their memories kept alive through stories, photos, and the shared pain of a community united in grief. The healing process was slow, arduous, and far from over. The scars of Vann's crimes ran deep, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and resilience can bloom in the most unexpected places. The case of Darren Deon Vann sent ripples through law enforcement agencies nationwide. It forced a reassessment of investigative techniques, a renewed focus on cold cases, and a greater awareness of the vulnerabilities of marginalized communities. The investigation highlighted the importance of interagency cooperation. The collaboration between local, state, and federal agencies proved crucial in apprehending Vann and bringing him to justice. It underscored the need for better communication, shared resources, and a unified front against those who prey on the innocent. The case also sparked a conversation about the often overlooked victims of violent crime, sex workers. Their transient lifestyles, their struggles with addiction, and the stigma associated with their profession often made them invisible, easy targets for predators like Vann. In the aftermath of the Vann case, there was a collective call for change. Advocates for sex workers demanded better protection, greater resources, and an end to the stigma that silenced their voices and made them vulnerable to violence. Law enforcement agencies implemented new training programs, focusing on identifying and supporting victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. The case served as a grim reminder that behind every statistic, every unsolved case, there was a human life cut short, a family forever changed. The legacy of Darren Deon Vann was one of loss, pain, and profound sadness. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged. A renewed commitment to justice, a greater awareness of the vulnerabilities within our communities, and a determination to honor the memory of the victims by working towards a safer, more just world. The chilling tale of Darren Deon Vann echoes far beyond the desolate streets of Gary, Indiana. It reminds us of the darkness lurking beneath ordinary lives, the monsters among us. Vann's ability to blend in highlights the reality of serial predators. They can be our neighbors, our co-workers, the faces we pass on the street. The victims, each with their own story, became statistics in a horrifying narrative. The case of Darren Deon Vann is not just a chilling true crime story, it is a call to action, a plea for greater awareness and a more proactive approach to combating violence against women. It compels us to confront the systemic issues, poverty, addiction, homelessness, and the stigmatization of sex work. It underscores the urgent need for comprehensive support systems for vulnerable individuals, providing them with safe havens, access to resources, and opportunities to break free from the cycles of despair. It demands that we, as a society, address the root causes of violence rather than simply reacting to its devastating consequences. Thanks for watching Hall of Crimes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell for more videos.